Hey, you're listening to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast about censorship and the arts. Today, we're returning to the final Nope, I got to introduce you first. My name's Todd Sullivan. As always, with me is Oren Barter.
Hello.
And today, we are looking at the final chapters of the Autobiography of Malcolm X. It wouldn't be unprecedented to keep a fudged opening, would it?
I think it would have been. It fits. It fits.
So this is an odd recording that we're doing here. We're not actually recording an episode right now because we already have an episode that's kind of ready to go up. Because the last time we recorded, we talked way too much.
I mean, I still think we could have put up a 2.5-hour podcast, but whatever.
I think your faith in the patience of our listeners is maybe greater than mine.
No. It wasn't 2.5. Like, what was it? An hour and a half? 2 hours almost?
The full recording, I think, was 1 hour and 50 minutes. So It's just 10 minutes shy of 2 hours.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think even when I got halfway through editing it, I was pretty sure that it wouldn't get less than 1 hour and 40 minutes. So, I mean, maybe we can put a poll up one day to see, what do you guys think is the ideal length of a podcast? And maybe we could get away with talking for 2 hours, but I don't think
we're not quite interesting enough to talk for 2 hours.
No, exactly. So yeah, here we are. We got to record a new introduction for the last episode that we split in two. What's going on in your life right now, Oren? How are things?
Things are pretty good. I have done my best to get rid of beer at home anyway, like just drinking at home by myself. I've been drinking a lot of different non-alcoholic beers. Kind of settled on O'Doul's as being the best, which is funny because that's the one you always think of, but I guess there's a reason for that.
I guess, yeah.
And yeah, I just found today some non-alcoholic craft stout, which was interesting. I thought I had to give that a try, and it was actually pretty good. So, yeah.
Nice. Do you remember the brand name of that?
I got one right here. Give me a second. Partake Brewing.
Partake Brewing. Interesting.
Yeah, they're based out of Toronto. They also had a pale ale. Not super crazy on the pale ale, so I didn't grab that, but I might grab it next time and give it a go.
Yeah, well, while we're speaking of beer, I went out to try to nab my lucky podcasting beer, which is the Phillips Blueberry Sour, and my local cold beer and wine store was out of it again. It's obviously very popular because they are frequently sold out of it. But while I was there, I decided I'd pick up. There's a new sour from Phillips that they had there, which is it's called Oro Blanco, and it's a grapefruit sour, and it is delicious. If people like grapefruit juice, and I don't mean and maybe this is so old that you would not remember it existed, but all grapefruit juice now seems to pretty much be like the pink grapefruit juice or the ruby red grapefruit juice.
Right.
And when I was young, grapefruit juice used to be like this almost yellowy colored, very, very sour juice. And that's what I think of when I think of grapefruit juice, because I loved it. But you can't really find it anywhere anymore. But this tastes exactly like that.
Oh, okay.
When I first cracked it open and I gave it a smell, I was like, holy crap, this is like classic grapefruit juice. And that's what I would, when I was having cocktails in my 20s and I would have a Greyhound, that's what I would have. That's the kind of grapefruit juice I would have. So
what's in a Greyhound?
It's vodka and grapefruit juice.
Oh.
It's a screwdriver, but with grapefruit juice. Screwdriver being vodka and orange juice.
Okay.
So there you go. You learned something about cocktails tonight.
I mean, why would they switch from a tool to a bus? I mean, wouldn't one be a screwdriver? The other one could be like a ball peen hammer.
I think the Greyhound is probably a reference to the dog more than the bus, but...
Oh, okay.
The bus is named for the dog,
Right.
not vice versa.
I don't know. You said Greyhound. I just automatically thought of the bus.
Yeah, although you're right. I mean, even if it's the animal greyhound, it doesn't have a whole lot in common with a screwdriver. I don't know the basis for the name screwdriver. But you're right, yeah, screwdriver, ball peen hammer. There could have been a whole suite of cocktails named after different tools, right?
Yeah, cross-tooth saw. I don't know if that's a real thing, but it sounds that sounds like when you really want to get drunk, that's what you would drink.
Yeah, like a chisel.
Yeah.
I feel like a ball peen hammer would definitely leave you with a nasty hangover the next day.
Are those all? I think those are all the tools that we know of.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the complete.
Those are all the tools I've ever heard of, and I'm not even sure about all of them. Some of them I might have made up. So without further ado, we're going to transition now into the rest of our discussion from our last recording session, and just a reminder that these are the final pages that came from Malcolm himself, chapter 18 and 19. His last words on himself and his legacy, whether he knew that they were going to be his final words or not. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll catch you here again in a couple weeks. Moving on to chapter 18. Hopefully not mispronouncing the title. El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. That is the name that I don't know if he chooses it for himself or if it's the sort of thing that's bestowed on you, but that is now Malcolm X's name following his shift from the Nation of Islam to the more traditional Islamic religion, which is a fitting title for chapter 18 because it's sort of about his first weeks and travels after that shift in his religious perspective. Primarily through Africa, where he is greeted very positively just about everywhere he goes.
Yeah, like the circle of people around him, while he's traveling is unreal. Princes, prime ministers, people of great importance, are inviting him to speak, inviting him to parties. He really does have this something about him that makes people of great importance want to either be associated with him or to discuss things with him, or which is very great and crazy.
Yeah, and looking at the circles he's traveling in at this point in time and the contacts he's making. And, I recall reading when he was in Africa, he was talking about the argument that American black people should consider not just fighting for equality and integration in America, but to actually place a human rights complaint with the United Nations, which I thought was a really intriguing and a really bold suggestion.
Because that's a lot different than a civil rights, right? A civil rights is, in-house. It's dealt with in-house. It's, but yeah, human rights.
Well, and because the United Nations has a, I can't remember what it's called, but something like a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Like, this is what the minimum of what people should be guaranteed simply by existing. And to argue that, black people were denied that by America. But my point, though, I think was looking at, like I said, the circles he was in and the contacts he was making, it's almost impossible to imagine the trajectory of his life and the trajectory of American society if he hadn't been killed.
Yeah. Because it never was brought up as a human rights issue.
Well, not even that particularly, but like that, this guy is building kind of this brotherhood, country to country to country, that he's gonna, bring that back to America with him, while also continuing to work towards, improving the state of the black race in America, while also, like, I would have to think that the American relationship with Islam might have been might have been dramatically different had there been someone of his stature bringing that religion, not the Nation of Islam element of it, but like the actual traditional Islam, bringing that and trying to deliver that to, at the very least, black Americans, perhaps all Americans. Like, be interesting to see if anyone has ever written one of those alternate history fiction books about like what would happen if Germany won the war, or in this case, what would have happened if Malcolm X hadn't been killed? Like, what would the world look like? So, while he was traveling through...
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, he was definitely building towards something. He was always moving forward, right? Like, he was just constantly this driving force. And yeah, it's maybe possibly impossible to imagine what he would have accomplished in his lifetime if he had had more time.
And it's also likely that if he hadn't been killed when he was killed, that he would have been killed not long after that. I mean, the 1960s was a volatile place, particularly for, people in the sort of position that he had. So as he's traveling through Africa, he's getting sort of word of shit going down in America. There's some sort of a rifle club called the Blood Brothers that I think were they shooting people? Were they killing people?
There was a rifle club. I'm putting that in quotations, I guess, for black Americans. It's kind of maybe like the NRA. Well, the NRA is more like a lobby group, but that was separate from the Blood Brothers thing. These two black males robbed a store and stabbed it was a husband and wife, stabbed the wife to death. When they were interrogated, they expressed that they were following Malcolm X. They called themselves Blood Brothers. That was separate from the rifle club. They kind of, the press used the rifle club as like, oh, the blacks are arming themselves, they're going to attack us. And then they used the Blood Brothers thing to kind of tie Malcolm into the whole violent thing. So they were separate incidences.
But in both cases, it seems like they were trying to attach Malcolm X to these things that were going on that he really wasn't a part of, because he wasn't even in the country. Yeah. He was on the other side of the world. But they kept trying to sort of attach him to these negative aspects of, black Americans, or even these violent aspects of black Americans. And you got to stop to wonder too, whether or not, how much of this might have been the work of the Nation of Islam trying to discredit him or, make him look bad.
That's interesting. I didn't think of that. I feel like when you look at journalism right now, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it was just simply journalists grasping.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right. Totally could be that. I'm not saying it necessarily was. But I also think that if an organization is putting out death threats on you,
they're going to try and slander your
they might do things that aren't quite that bad too, right? It's not like you got to go 100 miles an hour or zero,
right? Yeah.
It's like, well, he's in Africa, we can't shoot him right now. Let's just make him look bad.
Let's just sully his image. And he did express. I think it might not have been in this chapter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that his position with the Nation of Islam followed him for a long time. Even when he tried to distance himself, he seemed to be blocked by the positions that he held as a younger man.
Yeah. But But the other thing I thought was interesting too is that even as, you know, he's being asked these questions and as he's distancing himself from the Nation of Islam and even saying, you know, I'm not a member anymore, he is continuing to speak well of the members of Elijah Muhammad. You know, he's not speaking ill of them in the press. He's not saying, hey, you guys, they're trying to kill me, you know. And I guess he said that to Alex Haley, but for the most part, he is speaking very well of the organization, which again, I thought was really interesting, given the situation with, you know, him, the whole thing of him ending up on the outside of it.
I think he cared about the people that were part of those churches.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, as hurt, he must have been hurt. I mean, no man can go through what he went through and not be emotionally.
And work as hard for the organization as he did.
Oh, yeah. Like, it must have been absolutely heartbreaking to just be tossed aside like that. But I think he loved and appreciated the members of the church, the black community, the community that was built around Elijah Muhammad. Yep. And he didn't want to. Why would he want to destroy something that he worked so hard to build?
That's a fair point. But
you're right. He could have easily, like you said, just been like, hey, they're trying to kill me. They got people out for me. You know, I know somebody told me. It was it one of his sons that told him that there was an actual, because he did get confirmation. It wasn't just a speculation.
I don't remember.
Somebody was tasked to kill him, and instead of doing so, he expressed to Malcolm X, look, Elijah has...
Forgot about that.
Yeah. Elijah has, you know, put this out there. He's asked me to do this. I won't do this. I'm warning you. I'm going to leave you alone, kind of a thing. So he did get confirmation that it was coming from Elijah himself.
Mm-hmm.
God, I just couldn't imagine going through something like that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. What I thought was interesting anecdote from his travels and his speaking in Africa, there was he was speaking at one point and used the word Negro.
Right. Yeah.
And someone in the audience corrected him that the preference was Afro-American, right?
Yes.
Which struck me as entertaining. And I think you mentioned that it struck you as entertaining for the same reason, which is that we spent a good chunk of time early on in this podcast talking about the use of the word Negro and how odd it was to see.
And whether or not was that the appropriate term?
Was that the appropriate term?
I feel like we felt like it wasn't.
It wasn't. No, I mean, it might have been at the time. And it even might have been at the time. Mm-hmm. You know, 1930, 1940, 1950. But at this point, it's 1963, 1964. And maybe it's not appropriate anymore. And that's, again, it's an interesting look at the passage of time and the passage of history that we go through in this book. That we go from a word being acceptable at the beginning and now a word being called out as not being acceptable at the end.
It was a different place too, though. It was a different place. It might not be chalked up straight to the time aspect of it, but it was a different country altogether.
It was a different country.
It's interesting, like you talk about the passage of time and how things change. It's interesting also to see how much things stay the same when you compare these last couple of chapters and the things that Malcolm is calling for and the things that Malcolm is passionate about at this point in his life, and how things haven't really. I mean, maybe this is more of a deposition for the end of this podcast. I might be jumping the gun here, but you know, that old saying: the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah.
Right.
And there was a bit right at the end of this chapter that I wanted to read directly from the book, because it reminds me a little bit about where we're at today with the concept of systemic racism and racism being something that, you know, maybe people don't realize is there, and in not realizing it's there, assumes that it's not. Here in America, the seeds of racism are so deeply rooted in the white people collectively, their belief that they are superior in some way is so deeply rooted that these things are in the national white subconsciousness. Many whites are even actually unaware of their own racism until they face some test, and then their racism emerges in one form or another.
I think I highlighted that exact same quote.
And I think that's very much the case today, that there are people who are racist without knowing they're racist. And I think that was one of the sort of the more challenging things that for myself over the years, realizing that racism isn't just intentionally not hiring the black guy or
verbal
those
slurs,
overt actions.
Exactly.
It can be so many other subtle things, like walking a little bit faster as you go past the black neighborhood, or even things that aren't conscious. And those are the things that really need to be zeroed in on, because the big ones, the overt ones, those are the ones that are easy to call out and say, well, that's fucked up. Don't do that. It's all the little subtle ones that have a big impact over time, I think.
Well, and Malcolm touches on this, and I think really eloquently. He discusses the northern quote-unquote liberal, as he calls them, and the southern racist, conservative. I mean, not all conservatives are racist. Obviously, not all liberals are,
Yeah, the wolf versus the fox.
Yeah, that was a really, really interesting analogy. Was that in the last chapter, or was that in this chapter?
I think it was in the last chapter.
Okay.
But we're done with this chapter, I think, unless you had anything else to say on it.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't have a lot to say on this chapter, because it is a lot of just, he went to this country, he talked to these people, he went to this country, he talked to these people.
He did meet Cassius Clay again, or Muhammad Ali.
He did, yeah. That's probably worth mentioning quickly, because it does sort of connect back to the earlier meeting where they're
very, very brotherly, very friendly. Nobody had, and it's interesting that Malcolm X still calls Muhammad Ali Cassius Clay, even after, in the chronological order of his account of things, he has changed his name to Muhammad Ali. I found that interesting, and I'm not sure if that's something of note, or if that's just because he knew him as Cassius Clay, it was difficult for him to change the manner in which he. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I noticed that too, and I don't know myself. It's an interesting thing. And it's actually worth, before this anecdote, it is worth mentioning, I think, that they almost crossed paths in the previous chapter at Mecca.
Right.
Cassius Clay was coming through Mecca, and Malcolm X kind of went out of his way to make sure that they didn't cross paths, because he didn't want to create any sort of awkwardness, because he knew that Cassius Clay was still with the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm X had now since left.
Or been forced out.
Whatever.
A little bit of both, maybe, I think, at this point.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. But yeah, he does run into Muhammad Ali again, and Muhammad Ali hesitates, I guess, and doesn't know, because he like, they were close before Muhammad Ali became the heavyweight champion of the world, when nobody had him pegged to be anything. Everybody thought he was just, one more win, in Sonny Liston's long career.
Yeah.
And now he's this internationally known figure.
Well, I mean, I don't remember really well, but it's a pretty quick exchange, and I think it amounts to something like,
hi, how are you? Kind of a thing.
Hi,
yeah.
How are you? And I think it was something like, I hope you're well.
Yeah.
Because I remember after that, Malcolm did go on to say in the book that like that was a sincere message, that he really did hope that he was well, that he was happy, that yeah.
It's just interesting to see that stark contrast between how they interacted with each other when they were both members of the Nation of Islam, and how they interacted with each other post him being ousted.
Well, it's like when you leave Scientology and then you run into Tom Cruise. It's a little
I
awkward.
love Katie Holmes. Sorry. But I mean, it must have been so hard for him. So many people that were a part of his life would no longer talk to him anymore. I've heard of similar things within what's the one that goes door to door?
Oh, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses, yes. I've heard similar situations, family members that I have had who have been Jehovah's Witnesses, and if they get divorced or if they do something that is kind of against the church way, they kind of get ostracized by the very people that they felt so comfortable, so comforted, so connected with, and that kind of immediate and stark isolation must have been difficult. And
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in some religions, like your family is never going to talk to you again if you leave.
Well, it's like with the Nation of Islam, he hadn't spoken with his brother for years because he was ostracized, right? Mm-hmm. So him and his brother, because of his faith, hadn't had any interaction with each other. But I think his pilgrimage to Mecca and having that connectiveness with other Muslims probably was probably at the perfect time for him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember why I brought that up, but we were talking about the end of chapter. We were talking about his interaction with Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, with Cassius Clay.
Right.
So now we're at chapter 19, called 1965. This, of course, is the last chapter of the book. There is still an epilogue after this, but these were the last words to come from Malcolm X in the autobiography. And the title 1965, I think, is interesting because I imagine that this would have been dictated sometime in 1964, because Malcolm died on February 21st, 1965. So I'm guessing that the idea of this chapter was that it was a look ahead, at least to the next year, and then maybe into the future beyond. Although even in this chapter, he goes as far as to say that he does not expect to live long enough to see the publication of the book.
Yeah, which was chills.
And I think it was true. I don't think he saw the publication of the book.
How could he be so sure? Like, something must have been going on. Like, he must have... Oh, yeah, no, that gave me chills.
But there's a lot in this chapter, I think, that's interesting from the prospect of where the world is right now, too. One quote I wanted to read right from the start here. It's really short, but I think it's really relevant. And this is sort of, I think, maybe his final words on racism from the white man in American society. The white man is not inherently evil, but America's racist society influences him to act evilly. The society has produced and nourishes a psychology which brings out the lowest, most base part of human beings. And I do think that's true of American society. It's probably true of Canadian society. And I think it's true to this day.
Yeah.
That our society has a way of bringing out the lowest, most base part of human beings, and it's unfortunate. One of the things I thought was really interesting early on in this chapter is now that, you know, Malcolm is embracing the idea that there are some white people who want to help sincerely. He sort of asked the question, so, what can you do if you are a good-hearted or, a white ally? What can you do? And I think his answer is relevant as much today as it was in 1964/1965. First thing he said is to not run out and join black organizations. That, the black organizations are for the black people. And I mean, you can argue about whether or not that's valid, but...
Well, he had a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah, I mean, the one I wanted to mention, because I remember, I guess last year probably, or earlier this year, here in Kamloops, there was a group trying to put together a Black Lives Matter protest.
Right.
And the group putting it together ended up being criticized because they didn't have any
people of color.
They did not have any people of color involved in the setup of it. And so, following the criticism, they canceled the official protest. People still went to where it was supposed to be with their signs and everything else, but it wasn't, an official thing anymore. Mm-hmm. But I think that's an important point, that it's such a funny line, because on the one hand, I can kind of understand the people who say, like, well, when you tell me that as a white person, I shouldn't go out and do these things, isn't that being racist? But it's also, you don't want to be that white savior either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a whole other problematic issue, is needing to have, the white guy come in and save the day. This isn't what that fight is. I don't think. But then I'm just a white guy.
It's not. But as I think you're going to get to, because he does explain what we could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely agreed with everything that he said.
Well, basically, what he said was to start in your own community. Start, because it's coming from the white community that you're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So there is going to be racism coming from somewhere in your proximity. And
it's never as far away as you want it to be.
No.
If I can bring up a story, not a very good story. I was working. We weren't sure where to go. It was our first day. I was with my uncle, and we knew kind of the general area where we needed to be, but we weren't really sure the exact road we needed to take. And we also didn't know the vehicle of the person we were trying to get in contact with out there. There was no cell service or anything like that. They had recently bought a new vehicle, so we weren't really sure, what to look for. Mm-hmm. And I saw, a pretty nice looking truck. I thought maybe that was something, the boss would buy. And I said, like, hey, let's go drive up to it and see if that's him. We drive up, and there's these two guys in the truck, and they roll down their window. We were down our window, and we're like, oh, sorry, we were looking for our boss, and we weren't sure what truck he was in. We thought maybe you were him. And they're like, oh, no problem. And we're like, you have a good day. And they're like, you have a good day too. And we drove off to try and find where we were going. And they happened to be East Indian, darker skinned. Mm-hmm. And my uncle said, and I'll never forget this to this fucking day. He said, fucking blacks. Yeah. I looked at him and I got so mad. I said, what the fuck? Like, what did you just fucking say? And he said, oh, well, they're just out here. And he kind of trailed off. I was like, out here like what? Like, we're out here. They're out here. They're just people. I was so fucking mad. And like that, that's somebody in your immediate family.
Yeah.
And it's just, where did that come from? I don't understand. I don't get it. You know what I mean?
I'm no expert. I feel like it's usually taught. It's not something that you learn on your own.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from, parents. It can come from parents. It can also probably come from peers. But it's not, I don't think it's something you just pick up naturally.
So, I mean, I hope my anger made a difference. I don't believe it did. I think that he's still a racist piece of shit.
Well, I was thinking about that too. And I wonder whether or not, your response probably isn't going to change his mind about anything. But if it made him feel uncomfortable about saying it, and if it made him potentially less likely to say something similar again, then I feel like that is a net good.
Hopefully.
Right? That maybe there's even one less instance of him saying that's going to make somebody else uncomfortable.
It's extra frustrating because we have people of color in our family. Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder, does he just put on a face around them? It's frustrating.
Oh, I bet.
And is he the only one?
Yeah.
Is he the only one in my family? I mean, he's the only one who's outright said something that ridiculous to me. But maybe there's other people in my family who have the same feelings, who aren't as outright or haven't been around me, at least.
Or maybe it's been like, oh, hey, don't make those jokes around Oren. He's kind of a wuss.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't fucking know, right?
Yeah. It is unfortunately out there and probably more prolific than we'd like. 2020 in a lot of ways isn't all that different from 1965, especially looking at, the Black Lives Matter protests compared to the civil rights marches, the March on Washington, things like that.
I got to say, after reading this book, the protests, the quote unquote riots, I guess some people call them, makes a lot more sense to me. This isn't, it's not like this has been so long, too long.
Yeah.
And it's like he said, even back then, how long are we going to sit here and take this? How long are we going to, he didn't condemn anybody that went overboard. He's like, they went overboard because the situation is overboard.
Yeah. And there is, now that you mention that, there is some call for potential violence in this chapter. And I think this is the most overt example of that in the whole book. Seeing if I can find the actual references, but it basically comes down to if the white man is going to continue to abuse the black man and no one is going to do anything, then they're going to fight back, and they should.
I don't find that unreasonable. I don't think that's a call to violence. I think that's just a call to action.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I mean...
Yeah, me neither.
It's like the whole an eye for an eye, and eventually the whole world's blind.
Yeah, but protests and breaking a few windows and tipping cars, lighting stuff on fire, is that really on par with hundreds of years of what's been going on?
No. I wasn't.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't
criticizing the riots or the protests. It was more
violence begets violence, basically what you're saying.
Yeah. We're at a point where there are vigilantes now firing guns at protesters.
And they're not.
It's one step away from other vigilantes firing back, and then other vigilantes firing back, and then what the hell is that?
It's fucked up, man.
Yeah.
And this is secondhand information, but this is what I was told. I haven't really been watching the news. It's been pretty fucking depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it might pertain to the same person you were talking about, vigilante shooting at the protesters. And somebody told me that the president kind of commended the action.
He didn't speak negatively of it, unless there's something that I haven't seen. I haven't seen anything that I would say was like him commending it, but he didn't exactly condemn it either.
Was he arrested?
Yeah, he was arrested. And a Christian organization has now helped fund him $350,000 for his defense.
For real?
Yep, because there's nothing more Christian than shooting people.
Shooting protesters, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, is there anything else to talk about in this chapter before I decide I just want to go into the next room and sleep for 1,000 years?
Yeah, there is something I want to talk about in this chapter, which was very interesting to me. So he's discussing how he's now including not just whites but all other ethnicities and religions into his kind of group of friends. How he's more open-minded. He says, "My dearest friends have come to include all kinds. Some Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, agnostics." And here's the best part. He saves us. Right? He saves us for the end. And even atheists.
I mean, my God, those atheists.
I was like, wow, he saved us for the end. And then if you keep reading, he's like, I have friends who are capitalists, socialists, and communists. I was like, oh, okay, so atheists and communists on par, perfect. So some of my friends are moderates, conservatives, extremists, and some are even Uncle Toms. I don't know what Uncle Tom is. Is that the "We Want You" guy?
No, no, that's like Uncle Sam.
Who's Uncle Tom? I don't understand.
Uncle Tom is like a name for like a black character who's like kind of a pro-slavery guy.
Oh, okay.
It's like yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my friends today are black, brown, red, yellow, and white.
I see Uncle Tom on the "I Want You" poster now. Sorry, never mind.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was good. I was like, oh, shit, there I am. I'm an atheist. Right at the bottom of the list.
Where you belong.
And there was another thing. I had a couple of quotes here.
Go ahead.
I didn't get around to swinging in. He just says, "Anyway, now each day I live as if I am already dead. And I tell you what I would like for you to do when I am dead. I say it that way because from the things that I know, I do not expect to live long enough." And you did this quote here. "Do not expect to live long enough to read this book in its finished form." That just chills up my spine.
Mm-hmm.
"I want you to just watch and see if I'm not right in what I say, that the white man in his press is going to identify me with hate. And I do not know, I have not seen any press releases from after his death, but when we do the epilogue, I would like to maybe touch on that.
I had that same thought when I read that passage. I was like, I should see if I can track down any of the headlines from the day after he was killed to see
how he was painted. Yeah.
See how he was painted. Yeah. There was one, I went and looked him up on Wikipedia to get the date of his death. And while I was there in the section on his death, they had a link to an external page or an external image. And it was a newspaper page of the news of his being shot. And I'd like to go back to that again, because it was on my phone. I couldn't see it very well, but it was something like, an untimely end for the man called Malcolm or something like that. And they actually had a photo of him like lying on the ground dead.
Holy shit.
Which, yeah, you don't see in a lot of newspapers. But
no shit. That's crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. When we do the epilogue, it would be might be worth having that in our pocket to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, other than the fact that everything's depressing and I feel like he was almost prophetic in his death. Which just, and he was through the whole book. Like he literally
was. He was like, I'm going to die before this book is published. And he did. And from the little bit of reading, I mean, there were 3 members of the Nation of Islam who were prosecuted for it. So, well, one of them confessed, and 2 of them maintained their innocence through the entire thing. And the one guy that confessed said that the other 2 weren't involved, and that 2 other people were involved, but I don't think he ever named them.
Well, yeah, I guess we'll touch on that next time.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot more in that 1965 chapter, but really, beyond the comment about, like, what can people do to help, it just seems like, I don't know. It's a lot of looking ahead to what the future might bring in 1965, and it's a 1965 that is long past, and it's a 1965 that he never got a chance to see. So, yeah, I don't know.
And the future that he envisioned never came about.
Nope.
And maybe he could have, like you said, would he have brought it? Would he have brought it? You know, would he have made it happen?
Who knows? Yeah. It's nice to think, and it's nice to imagine and hope, but odds are 2020 would just be a shit show in a different way. Anyhow, that brings us to the end of chapter 19, and to the end of the chapters from Malcolm X in this book. We have one big chunk of book left. It's 100 pages. It's the epilogue written by Alex Haley. And we will be discussing that on the next episode of the podcast. Along with, hopefully, it's going to be hard to track down because I don't think it's on any streaming services. But I am hoping that we can get a chance to watch Spike Lee's film Malcolm X, and maybe talk a little bit about that in the next episode alongside the epilogue as well. I can
get that probably on Google Play for us.
Oh, groovy.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they've got rentals there, right?
Yeah, or just buy it.
Yeah. The planned schedule for the next few weeks, or the next few episodes. The next episode after this one will be a discussion of the epilogue and hopefully the Malcolm X film. The episode after that will be the final wrap-up of the discussion of the autobiography of Malcolm X, talking about our feeling about the book as a whole, and really hopefully digging down onto our thoughts about whether it was valid for this book to be challenged, whether it was valid for this book to be banned, talking again about why the book was banned or challenged, and that sort of thing, and just sort of discuss it as a whole. That is an episode that I'm hoping to be able to do live on Podbean. We would probably do it on a Sunday afternoon, probably 1 or 2 o'clock, Sunday being the date that the podcasts usually go up. So we would maintain that same Sunday schedule. It's just that would be a live episode where people could hopefully engage with us either in a chat room or maybe even with people calling in. I have yet to test Podbean's live podcast functionality, which I hope to do obviously before we get to the live episode, and just get a feel for what sort of options are possible. It might end up just being me and Oren talking to each other like normal, in which case, you know what, we've gotten used to doing that. That's okay. But I think ideally we would have a couple of people who've been listening to the podcast and who want to come and engage. Speaking of which, if you are listening to the podcast and you are enjoying what we're doing, please think about liking the podcast or leaving reviews or comments on the podcast on the platforms that you listen on. I think the more engagement we get with people, so the more likes, the more comments, the more reviews, the more that improves, the algorithm's willingness to show us to other people. So yeah, if you like what we're doing, please leave comments, please leave likes. And if you want to converse with us, do that through comments, or we do have a Facebook page if you want to drop by and chat with us there. And of course, like I said, hopefully we'll have a live podcast.
Can I make a counterpoint?
Please do.
Yeah, if you don't like us, talk to us too.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's something you don't like about what we're doing,
let us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
We can't improve it if we don't know we're screwing up. If you have suggestions, if you have a favorite banned book, or you have a banned book that you've heard of that you've never read but you're super curious about, we are coming to the end of our first book, and of course need to be looking for what we're going to do next. So yeah, please, if you don't start engaging with us, we're just two guys talking to each other in an
hey,
internet
you know what?
void here.
That's
so.
okay. If that's all,
That's okay too. I don't mind.
We're okay with that.
Absolutely. As always, thanks everyone for listening. My name's Todd Sullivan.
And I'm Oren Barter.
This has been When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Go read a fucking book.
Do it.